Okay, so now we're recording, and she's going to share her screen with us in just a moment. And you can see that what she has on her screen is a lot cuter than what I had on my screen, even though Yvette's are awfully cute. I'd just like to introduce her because this is a topic that really is very near and dear to my heart because it's what hooked Tom and I on birding. We became master naturalists, and this is one of our first things that we did to get hours. You got 6 hours every time you went out. Oh boy, that was great. And but the first time you put your hands on a live bird, hold them in your hand, it hooks you right through the heart. And we've been birders ever since, and we've been working with banding. But bird banding is a specialized data gathering method that a lot of people in the general public really don't know about, or if they don't understand what it's all about. So Yvette's going to explain a bit of the history and the benefits of banding. She's going to showcase some of the techniques and tools, which are very specialized, and discuss training and opportunities for anyone out there who's interested in taking a deeper dive into birding. And I know some of you are master naturalists and you are interested in that, so here's a good opportunity to learn. Now, Yvette, tell you a little bit about her. You know, she was at Mitchell Lake. She was our education coordinator there for what, about a year, Yvette, wasn't it? But she still works for Audubon. She is on the statewide level now. She is leader of 2 statewide programs, Audubon's Conservation Leaders for Young Women. Wonderful program, and she's just fabulous working with the young ladies. And Bird City, Texas, that you've probably heard of. That's our Lights Out program is part of that, and San Antonio is a Bird City, Texas, and she loves doing it. You can tell she's just full of energy and full of ideas and loves the back and forth with people who love birds as well as we do. She's got a degree in conservation biology from the University of Rhode Island. She's come south from there and is completing her master's degree in education from the University of Texas, so she'll have both ends of the spectrum. She's a passionate and excellent birder. She's helped with bird banding in Saipan, North Carolina, and now Texas. She loves all creatures. She loves tiny spiders and soaring eagles and everything in between. And when she's out teaching, she turns into a magical thing. I have experienced it. She loves what she does, and she loves to get other people to learn and grow in the great outdoors. So we're looking forward to what you've got to show us tonight, Yvette. Sorry about that. So I'm going to turn it over to you and go offline here.
All right. I'm going to stop sharing my video as well, only because my computer is like really stressed with the PowerPoint. So we'll just turn off all the videos and we'll look at the beautiful birds instead, which is so much better. So thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm excited to talk about this. If you know the species, go ahead and put it in the chat. We'll start off right here with these little babies. And then let's change the slide. All right, so a very brief history on bird banding. My understanding is that banding has been happening for like a long time. So falconry, started at least in the Middle Ages, may even be older. And of course, those birds were banded, they were kept track of. It was actually considered your hierarchy in your status was related to the type of bird that you could use in falconry. And so of course, knowing which your bird was and making sure it came back to you was an important part of that. And then there have been a lot of misconceptions. So people used to think that swallows overwintered in mud, which is really interesting. Like from our perspective today, why would they think that? But then you think about like they build their houses out of mud, they skim water off the top. Maybe there was some combination there, but it wasn't until John James Audubon took some thin wire and twisted onto a phoebe's leg that he was able to show migration. And really what I would say is that he showed nest site fidelity because he put this little twist on the bird and then it came back the next year and bred again on his property. So then skipping ahead to the 1920s, the US Geological Survey created the bird banding lab. And this is where even today we get our bands from. It's where we report our data back to. It is the machine behind the science. It just keeps everything going. In 1998, the North American Banding Council was created. And this is a bunch of scientists, ornithologists, and bird banders who are looking at more of the ethical side of bird banding. And they help people, get trained efficiently, understand the safety, really advocate for good handling techniques and accountability. So many of you that are on the call today, you're probably wondering, why do we do this? What's the benefit? And there's so much to learn about birds. Even nowadays, there's so much more information that we can be gathering. So when you have a bird in hand, you can look at those feathers a lot more closely. You can start to understand what is happening in that bird's life, and especially the molt cycle. It's actually not fully understood when it starts, why it starts. There's a whole bunch of variety. If we look at tropical birds versus temperate birds, like the birds that we see here, they have different molt cycles. They have different connections to breeding, etc. Also, when you do long-term studies and you have data that piles up, you can start to understand if a bird is using that habitat or how that habitat is being used. And specifically what I'm talking about is if you are constantly catching young birds, so second-year birds, birds who are just starting to breed, and you don't catch nearly as many adults, that's telling you something about the dynamic of the habitat. Generally speaking, you can tell how healthy a habitat is because those adult birds, they're going to fight. They're going to defend their territory better than a younger bird. So when you have lots of adults and a small smattering of first-year birds or second-year birds, you can tell it's a really good habitat. Then you can look at individual habitat use. So with this bird here, if you know the species, go ahead and put it into the chat. I haven't checked to see what people are doing. But this is a little bird that we were trying to see if it was using that same general habitat throughout the entire winter or if it was just moving through. And so we gave it this specific color combination that you see here. And if we go back to that area year after year, if we can recite any of the color banded birds, then we start to develop understanding of how this individual is using the habitat. And then lastly, well, not lastly, there's probably many other reasons why people ban birds, but what I was thinking about is DNA. So UNT had a Harris hawk study that was happening in the valley while I was living down there. And they were taking very small blood samples from the hawks and they were looking at paternity, so lineage, but they were also looking to see, how DNA is changing within a population. Sometimes you can get that information also from feather pulls because there's a small amount of DNA that sticks to the rachis when you pull the feather out. And most feather pulls either happen from the chest or sometimes from the tail. So it's not harming the bird. It's usually just one feather, but it's enough DNA to make it worthwhile. So the great horned owl was that first picture. I saw some people put some questions in there. So, okay, getting involved with bird banding. I, like Patsy and Tom, got involved with bird banding through volunteering. And my first experience was through the University of Rhode Island. When I was a student there, I was taking ornithology in the fall. It was an amazing class. Maybe our second field trip, we went to the Kingston bird banding station, which had been operating for 30 plus years at that point. And shortly after that class, I got really, got me very excited about the idea of birds and ornithology and bird banding. My dad became terminally ill, so I left school. When I came back to school, I was not able to complete my ornithology class. And that was heartbreaking because I wanted to know more. So I just volunteered. I spent at least two mornings a week at the bird banding station in the fall. And then I got a first job on campus with hermit thrushes. And then that led to spring migration at Block Island, which is the picture you see here. It's a sharp-shinned hawk that was caught with a dogaza net. And I got to see my first couple of accipiters up front. It's really awesome. So volunteering is a great way to get involved. Craig Hensley, who's on the call today, he is also going to be looking for volunteers. He's doing a banding study at Cibolo Nature Center. So Craig, if you want to throw some information or contact into the chat, people will follow up with you there. I've also done, like I said in the intro, I've done bird banding in Saipan in North Carolina. I've helped out with a variety of projects in Texas so far. But if that's too much, if you don't have time to to do that kind of project, you can pay to get trained. So the Institute for Bird Populations, or IBP, they have two different wonderful classes, one for beginners, one for advanced. The classes happen a couple times throughout the year. You can find their latest dates on their website. And I think the range is probably 800 to 1,200, somewhere in there. You get food, you get your lodging taken care of, you get up really early, you're setting up the nets, you're holding the birds, you're learning about extraction. It's every aspect of bird banding, and it's incredibly informative. So those classes are wonderful. I highly recommend them. But again, if you don't have the time, you don't have the finances, you can get a lot of banding information and banding experience at different festivals. So the Yellow Rail and Rice Festival that happens in Louisiana, a couple years ago, I think they're doing the same thing now. They had a bird banding class. So you could pay a couple $100 to be in a bird banding class. You'd spend the morning songbird banding and then the afternoon with these guys. So these are Soras. They also had yellow rails. They had king rail, all the different kinds of guys that are coming up through the rice fields that are being harvested. So you get a lot of different experience. And also the RGB Birding Festival that's coming up, they also have a banding class. It's less hands-on, it's more of a demonstration where Mark Conway will explain the benefits of bird banding and you'll get to see the birds up close. If that still seems like it's too out of pocket, you're not going to have the time for that, you can still support bird banding research. Every time you see a hawk with a band on it, or you see a shorebird with a band on it, if you see those color combinations, there are ways to report resightings. If during those wonderful lights out surveys that you folks have been doing, if you find a deceased or injured bird with a band on it, reporting that band number is critical information. There's so much to be learned. And so it's really important that you get that data back to the bird banding lab. And then follow up, you have to have a specific reason for handling birds. So if you don't want to volunteer, but you wanted to start your own project, maybe you're looking for a second career or a first career, and you want to start bird banding, you really have to understand the scientific needs. What are we going to learn by you handling birds? Okay, so you need a justification, and then you have to apply for the correct permitting. Again, the BBL, the Bird Banding Laboratory, has a lot of requirements for banding. You have to specify what kind of traps you're using. Are you going to be using lures? Are you going to use audio lures? Are you going to be color banding? What's the combination of those color bands? So there's so much information that you have to submit before you can be properly permitted. So I've thrown out a lot of information, potentially a lot of interesting places to go. If you want to continue learning about the science and read some great papers and see what information we are learning from bird banding, you can look up the institutes on the left side of the screen. So IBP, the East Bird Banding Association, the West Bird Banding, et cetera. All of these have either monthly, quarterly, or bi-monthly publications. They could be electronic, they can be paper copies, but they're constantly updating folks about what is happening in the research world. So great information there. But if you're like me, I don't have time to read a lot of that stuff. So I like to follow bird banding organizations on social media. I particularly love IBP and Powdermill and Black Swamp Bird Observatory because they put quizzes up on their website. So it helps me stay sharp on, fall ID, which is trickier than spring ID, sparrows, when we start to see all of those guys. So there's wonderful ways that you can keep learning more and more about bird banding. So projects. Again, Bird Banding Lab, they want to know what you're doing, when you're doing it, how you're doing it. MAPS, TMAPS, and MOSI are all different banding programs that Institute for Bird Populations runs. MAPS stands for Monitoring Avian Productivity and Survivorship. TMAPS is just tropical monitoring. And then MOSI is the overwintering survivorship of birds. MOSI happens mostly in Central and South America. There was one site in Texas and maybe a couple in Southern California, but everything else is happening, Mexico through Argentina or Chile. There's migration banding, which are incredible stations. Again, Black Swamp Bird Observatory, they get hundreds of birds in spring and fall migration. They are a machine. And they also do training. So Powder Mill has a great training course. Winter site fidelity. Mark Conway in the Valley and Craig have both studied, what birds are using the habitat? Are they coming back every winter? How are they using that? So what mix of species are using the habitat? There are university projects. I mentioned UT-RGB earlier when I stumbled through the festival. UT-RGB is the school that my husband went to, and he's studying greyhawks. University of North Texas, they have not just the Harris Hawk project that I've already mentioned, but also the American Kestrel project. So both of those are being trapped, banned, and released. And then there's things like endangered species projects. So when we were in North Carolina, Michael volunteered with the Endangered Species Branch on Fort Bragg. And then David Simpridge at Fort Hood, he studied black-capped vireos, and now he's gone to sedge wrens, I believe. Okay. So once you have a site and you have your experience and you're ready to run a site, it's freaking hard work. It's a lot of sweat and exhaustion, and it is so worth every minute that you're out there. So these two men on the screen, these are folks that helped in Saipan. We had to machete our lanes. So where you string up the net has to be clear of trees, not entirely clear, but so that if the net is moving, it's not getting snagged on all these branches, et cetera. So you can imagine in Saipan, which is a tropical island, they were hit with a hurricane a year before we went out there. And so they were still recovering. The tropical forest, that stuff grows up very quickly in that time frame. So it was probably about a week and a half of going out and clearing net lanes all day, lots of sweat, and then we finally start to catch the birds. When you're setting up your nets to catch birds, you have to be aware of things like sagging poles or sagging nets. In Saipan in particular, it's a very rocky terrain, so you have very little soil. So as you try and stick these metal poles into the ground to put your net on, they don't always grip. They sometimes hit a rock and you only have 3 inches of pole in the ground. You have to kind of tie it up. If you have sagging nets, the birds can see it and they will avoid it, and then you don't get to learn from the birds. Or the other hazard is potentially a bird getting too twisted. And so part of the North American Banding Association, their ethics for birding is that the bird's safety is always paramount. It's always the most important thing. So if your nets are sagging, you're not living up to the standards of banding, and you should reconsider what you're doing. So other things, plant matter getting in the way, if you are doing it on private property, if you get access taken away, if the site is flooded, if there's thunderstorms coming around, there's a lot that can hold back your ability to actually band birds. These are just 2 images of what happens to the nets. Nets are expensive equipment. If they get tied up in knots, you really have to be patient and pull it apart. On the left side of the screen, there are some large holes there that might be hard to see, but that black line down the middle, that's called the trammel line. It helps the net maintain its shape while you have it up to catch the birds in. And that was broken on this one. So I spent about an hour threading it through all that net that you see and repairing the net. A lot of banders spend a lot of time after the fun of the birds repairing their nets. So let's get into it. Let's get into the actual banding, the more important part. I'm going to talk to you about bird banding for passerines and for hawks. That's what I've really had the most experience with. So again, part of the ethics of bird banding, people who do not understand banding get very uncomfortable and they get afraid for the birds if you take a picture of just a bird hanging in a net. They think the bird is hurt or that it could be stressed, etc. So instead, here is a beautiful wolf spider having a tasty snack that was on our net. And this wolf spider, he's a chunky one. It was over an inch, maybe an inch and a half long. And so you can kind of use that as a way to see how fine the mesh is or the threading is for mist nets. On the right side of the screen, we have what we call a ball chatry. And this is a type of trap that we use for hawks. So what you can't see very well in this picture but you can see here, is that the top is covered with these tiny little nooses. So the bird comes in for a snack. Usually we use mice or gerbils or house sparrows in here. And they come in, they try and get that snack, but instead their foot gets grabbed. And the lures are fine. This is some guys after some banding. They're still running around. They had their snack. They're totally safe. So here is a photo from bird banding in Rhode Island. And what I'm doing here is I'm extracting the bird. And so this is the feet first grasp, where I've secured the feet and I'm slowly working the net off the bird. Another more experienced way to get birds out of nets is what's called the full body grasp. And so if you think about a bird flying, its wings are going to go out and then close to their body and then back out. And so ideally, when a bird flies into a net, right, it's been trying to just go through the forest, it didn't see the net. So its wings should be out and the net just gets caught on the bend of the wings. And so it's really easy using the full body grasp to kind of reverse that motion and pluck the bird out of the net. And they're both safe handling techniques, but this one here, the foot grasp, this is something that more novice people do. The body grasp is a little bit more skilled. Okay, here is our first video, and it's a short video of me taking a Harris hawk off a trap. So the bird is on the road, and it's a dirt road. There's no traffic going by. And I'm going to start the video and try and just explain over it. Let's see, here we go. Grabbing both of the bird's feet and putting it into my left hand. This way I have control over the bird. It can't get me. Now I'm looking to see where the lures are attached. I see one, and there's a second one just barely on the talon. There it is, it's gone. I'm gonna rotate the bird. And now just that one that's higher up on the foot, pull it off, and the bird is free. So once we have gotten the passerine out of the mist net, or the hawk off of the ball chatry, or the BC, we're going to transport it to the banding station. Ideally, we are doing that, for banding passerines, the banding station is ideally far away from the nets. We don't want the noise of conversation, of trying to properly age something to be distracting to the other birds that are around us. So you put the little bird into the proper size bag, and then you're going to carry that back to the banding station. For hawks, we're going to use these transportation tubes. So ideally, like that Harris hawk, again, we're on a dirt road, there's no one around, we're totally safe. We're just going to go to the back of the car, band that bird as soon as possible and release it. If there was a need to kind of move slightly off the road, like for Mike's greyhawk research, we are often doing it in suburban areas, then you carry the tube horizontal so that there's no pressure on the bird and the bird is safe. Tubes, just like the bags, have to be the right size for birds. If a bird is in a bag or a tube that is too big, they can move around, they could potentially strain their wing. For hawks, their feet can get you. That's not good. If a tube or a bag is too tight, it can be putting undue pressure on that bird and stressing the bird. So you really got to size the bird and use the proper carrying device. Okay, we've got the bird, it's out of the net, it's ready to get banded. How are you going to do that? You have to measure the leg of the bird. You have to put the right size on. If a band is too tight, it can harm the bird. It can rub off scales. It could potentially, cut off circulation, anything like that. It's very rare. If it's too loose, the other concern is that it could fall off, in which case you've lost the data, but more likely it could maybe get caught on a branch, it could get caught on a twig, something like that, and the bird might get hurt. So banders are very, very aware of what proper sizing looks like, and will use the proper band size, and then all of these different pliers here are the different ways that you attach that. On the right side of the screen, we have two different types of bands. On the very right, those tiny little circles, those are our aluminum bands, which is what most birds get, except for cardinals. Cardinals, with their badass beak, they can kind of crush a regular aluminum band. So we use stainless steel for them. Okay. The bands that are kind of in the middle of the screen with that extra tab on it, this is called a lock-on band. And it's what we use for all the hawks that we band. Again, hawks, they have those very strong bills. They could potentially pull off a regular band. So we give them a lock-on band. Okay. Here is my second video, if I can find it. Here we go. Michael's banding a red-tailed hawk. First, he's going to separate the feet. Their talons can puncture their own feet, so you always make sure they're not grabbing themselves. He's also brushing off some flat flies parasites. Measuring it, he's confirmed what size he needs. He's going to get his tools ready. In this particular case, Michael was using a digital recorder for his banding information, so he's reading off the band as well. He's going to open it up wide enough that it can slip onto the hawk's leg. Get his other tools ready that he needs to close the band. Make sure the band is in the right position. And then he puts it on, squeezes it tight, and then he'd grab those pliers and finish putting it on. This is a wide-eyed vireo. So I'm going to use the leg gauge. I'm going to make sure I get it around the leg, rotate it, make sure it's the right size. That felt a little tight. We're going to go to the next size. Okay, that's the better fit. And here we are. The band is already open. It's in the plier. Going over the leg, you gently close it. You make sure it's not pinching. And bam, some fancy jewelry. Okay. Here's Tony Heenahan. He's banding hummers. Like Patsy said earlier, they're very delicate. They're very tiny bands. So he's kind of showing you where it is on the foot. It's very hard to see. That's the tool he uses to kind of open up the band and slip it over the foot. And again, if you look closely, you might be able to see that band. It's really tiny. Oh, there it is. And Tony would want you to know that hummingbirds are in the order Apodiformes, which means without foot. And that's because their foot is so small, you can't really see where the band goes. So you may have noticed how each person was holding their bird differently. And so there are a couple different really common types of grip. The first you see here, this is called the bander's grip. And it's used for passerines or doves, maybe some shorebirds, depending on their size and how chunky they are. You'll notice that the bird's head is between my pointer and my middle finger. It's secure. The wings are against my palm. And if you look down towards the foot, you can see that there's plenty of space around that band for it to rotate and to move freely on the leg without harming the bird. In this position, it's very easy to study the molt of the bird. The photographer's grip, which you see here, is when you are holding up high on the bird leg, right under its body, you're controlling the legs, and the feet get pinched between the thumb and the pointer. And it's the most beautiful position for taking photography of a captured bird. And sometimes there are some great molt anomalies that you can see in this position. For hawks, we have what's called the basic leg grip. If you look closely at Michael's hand, you can see the pointer finger is between the legs and the rest of the hand is wrapping around the outside of the legs. So this protects you from their murder mittens and also makes sure the hawk can't get away from you. This is what's called the ice cream cone grip, or as I learned it, the popsicle grip. And this is only really for accipiters. And so that's the sharpshin, the Coopers, maybe a Merlin. And what you're doing here is you're pinning the wings, the top part of the legs, and the tail. So the bird can't get loose and it can't flop around. It can't strain its wings or get you with its feet. Tony Heenahan's going to speak about birds.
Finger out, I'm supporting the wings, I'm supporting bird with these fingers as well. And I'm keeping her.
So again, Tony's got special training to handle Hummer, so we always let him speak. Michael here is removing, well, I'm not going to tell you what species it is, you can guess. So he's getting the feet, getting them under control, lifting it out, pulling it out. Again, finger between the legs. And whoop, there she is. Go ahead and put the species in if you can guess from this side view. Here I am handling a small passerine. So the right hand is keeping the bag closed so the bird can't escape. The left hand is positioning the bird properly before I bring my hand out of the bag. And ta-da! This is a little house wren. It's kind of hard to see here. And you saw that I just scooted it back into my hand so I have more control over it. Again, bander's grip, the head's always way back, kind of wedged between your fingers. Okay, you've got the bird, it's safe. You put the band on it. Well, what data do you want now? Each group of birds is going to have different measurements that we take on it, depending on the purpose of the research, who's leading that research, when it's going to get reported back to the banding lab, etc. Here's another video montage. So Tony here, he is banding a hummer. He's measuring the wing. The ruler is on his finger. There's no pressure or weight on the bird whatsoever. And he's going to record his data when he's finished with that measurement, and he's securing it. Here is that white eye again, measuring the wing. Kind of put my thumb under their wing joint just to kind of keep it up instead of flattening against the ruler. And here's Mike with his hawk again. There's Raptor, I should say. And he's doing the same measurement technique. So he's keeping the wing off the ruler. There's two different types of measurements. If you flatten the wing against the ruler, you're no longer measuring the wing chord. And here's the weight. So it's the only time that Michael puts the tube upside down because he doesn't want to put pressure on the bird. He's going to slide it out. He's going to get it back in that safe grip. And watch closely, there's a flat fly. So he's trying to get rid of that parasite. He pulls the tube out and he's going to put the tube back on the scale. And now he has what's the negative weight. So it's the full weight of the bird, but it just shows that negative sign because he teared it out earlier. And one last hummer. So Tony has her in just a light stocking. It's what we call a taco. It keeps the hummingbird's wings from moving around. Hummingbirds are so delicate. If they get wing strain, it could be fatal. So you're always handling them with the utmost careful, and you're keeping their wings from moving. He's already zeroed out his scale, his spring scale. He measures her, makes sure she's not bouncing around too much, and then he's done. Another quiz point, if you want to take a guess how much a hummingbird weighs, think about it in coins, how many coins it might take, and go ahead and put that into the chat. Okay, we're almost done with all the videos. Here is a brief olive sparrow. And so this is an adult. I'm going to turn the video off a little bit and just explain it because otherwise the recording is too low. But you can see there's all dark wings. There's no corners on those wings. And so this is the bander's grip where we can spread the wing and see what's happening, look for any kind of a molt anomalies. So what I'm pointing out there are the greater coverts or the secondary coverts, and they all look uniform. There's nothing highlighted there. Flatten the wing a little bit, just kind of smooth everything out. And now look at the primaries. That's the wing coverings towards the front of the wing, right there where my finger is. Again, all dark and all uniform. Here's that same bird. You can really see those distinctive different feathers. And now I'm going to show you the face. So in the video, I'm talking about the color of the eye, which you can kind of see here on the right-hand side. And then also the crown pattern, which again, you see better on the right-hand side. Okay, this is an adult olive sparrow. If we compare it to this guy, the juvenile olive sparrow, you can really see the molt differences here. Actually, I'm going to bring up the pointer. Yes, we can see that. Okay, so here are the greater coverts on the juvenile, all that edging to it, that lighter color versus the same feathers on the adult. Okay, check out how sharp and glossy and dark the alula is right here compared to this, which is round. It's not really the same quality. It kind of looks like it's falling apart a little bit. The eye is much darker. It's more of a brown. It's not red at all. The crown is not developed. Okay? And the feather quality just looks different. Okay? These look a lot more disheveled on the juvenile. So whoever said peregrine, you're right for the raptor that Michael was banding. And then the 1 ounce, Stephen, is actually, it's much smaller than that. It's about a penny. It's 5 grams. So, all right. Here we have a little bit more information on how feathers grow out. So this left-hand diagram, we've got some different types of feathers here. Just so we're all on the same page, when you look at a bird wing, the bend in the joint, that is the delineation between the 2 different types of feathers. So you see where it says P1, P2, P3, this is when we're talking about the primaries. And then above the primaries are the corresponding coverts. So the primary coverts are right here. On the left side, we have the secondaries. And the only reason you need to know this is just that they grow out at different times, okay? So going over to the right-hand side of your screen here, this is an olive sparrow again. And this is what I think was a second-year olive sparrow. I didn't keep very good notes. We already handed in the data. I just had this picture because of how beat up the feathers are. But my guess is second year because you see these beautiful green, nice coverts, and then you see this faded one. So this is a retained feather from the year before. Okay. Sparrows, they spend a lot of time on the ground and they get some sunlight, and that's what has broken down these feathers. You know, moving through shrubby areas, lots of sunlight damages the feathers and they break. That's why birds molt, they have to replace them. And same thing here with the outer feathers. You see how worn and brown they are compared to those nicer looking feathers on our last bird? It's probably a relatively young bird. I learned all of this through the Pyle guides. So Peter Pyle is an incredible ornithologist. He has done all this very detailed research, understanding how and when birds shed their feathers. And so we often in the birding world or banding world call these the Pyle guides or the birding Bible. He does not like that last one, so we'll just stick with the Pyle guides. Okay, a couple of quick other pointers. So again, on this common yellowthroat, you see these 4 feathers here that are just brown. They're really worn out looking. They don't even have very nice edging. And then compare them to these 3 ones here. Very different. And so this bird is probably a second-year bird. I'm not going to try and guesstimate their age too much. This was from the second advanced bird banding class that I took with IBP. And we all took photos of the different bird wings just to kind of remember what it looks like. This is a bronze cowbird on the right-hand side of your screen. These guys are nearly impossible to age because they replace all of their feathers in the early fall. What you have to look for is retained feathers, so brown worn feathers under their wing. And here's a Carolina wren, and you can see all these middle feathers here. These are the secondaries that have been retained, as well as the retained coverts with those white dots. So different generations of feathers there. And that's it. Those subtle differences are what we are looking for when we are banding birds and trying to understand how old they are. So let's see if I can get this to work. Nope. Okay. So 1 second as I change my pointer options. I'm sorry, that's not letting me go back. So I'm going to stop sharing. And then I'm going to go back to sharing. Nope. Okay, sorry about that. Let's watch this cool video. So Harris hawk. Okay, so we just caught this beautiful, I'm going to turn off the pre-recorded of it, but it's a female Harris hawk. It's nice and chunky. She's got some cool molt in here that we can understand exactly how old she is. Extending that feather, or sorry, extending the wing. You see those outer feathers my hand is pointing to right now? Those are juvenile feathers. See how much white they have? And then compare them to these darker inner ones. These are replaced adult feathers. Those 2 that I'm pointing out, you can see that little bit of white mottling. That is usually what happens the first time a Harris hawk grows in adult feathers, right? Melanin is very expensive energetically. So it takes a lot of energy to grow perfectly black, glossy feathers. Here we go. These are the primaries I'm pointing out. And then from there in, secondaries. So we got some new ones right there. Old, and new ones back there. So hawks grow their feathers in a slightly different way than small birds. Looking at her tail, you can see the older, beat up, right there, juvenile feathers. The beautiful black, glossy ones. One that's just growing in, that's why it's shorter than the others. And now I'm going to take a moment because I am looking for a special mark on the feather. Oh, right there. That's a fault bar. You see that line across the tail? The feather is not as strong as other ones. Maybe she missed a meal the day that feather started growing in. We don't know, but eventually that feather might break like the one to the left of it. So just as a heads up, I'm about 35 minutes into my presentation, and I probably could do another 15 to 20. So if you have to drop off, no worries. Here is what we are looking at called wing wear. Look at how beautiful these feathers are. They look pristine. Everything is glossy and they are well held together. Compare that to this. Now they're different species. Okay, so maybe you would think that's the reason. But if you see how beat up these feathers are, especially towards the tips, right in here, that is feather wear. So birds, between the sun, flying, cleaning them up, getting them dirty, the feathers break down and they have to be replaced. Usually that happens after they've bred for the first time, but sometimes we have the alternate plumage. So birds who want to look sexy in the spring grow some new body feathers to look extra bright. So when we are holding a bird, not only are we looking for these age characteristics, we're not just checking out their feathers, we often want to know if they're breeding or not. So here is a short video on whether or not this bird is a male or a female. And I'll explain what's happening afterwards. Just look at it, observe it, see if you can figure out what's happening here. Okay, so that's a really cool video. This is a bridled white-eye that we caught in Saipan. And what I'm showing you there is during the breeding season, when a bird has eggs in the nest, they lose the feathers around their belly. Their belly swells up. It has extra fluid there because when it settles on to those little eggs, it's going to keep them warm. It's going to keep them in this squishy, warm envelope of skin. Now, usually we just see that bare belly swelling and then the shrinking, which is what's happening in this video, all those wrinkles. This bird has finished incubating. It probably has young in the nest, so it's still keeping them warm, but it's not as fluffy as it was when there were eggs present. And so that wrinkly skin, that kind of swollen, bright red skin, usually just occurs in females. But some species, both males and females, incubate. Now, I'm going to actually go back to that video real quick. Look at the very base of the bird and you're going to see its cloaca. Its cloaca is kind of swollen and crazy looking. So just take a moment and look. Right there with those bright yellow feathers sticking out of it, that's the cloaca. So the cloaca usually swells on just the males. And that's so that as he tries to transmit sperm to the females, he has a better chance of making contact with her cloaca. But again, some species, if both the males and females are going to incubate, sometimes that cloaca gets bulbous on the females too. So this is why it's very hard to properly identify the gender or sex of these birds. And the last thing that we might try and do when we have a passerine in hand is skull it. So that's what I'm doing here. I've kind of messed up the head feathers. I'm trying to look at the skin because when a bird does not have good molt patterns, like the bronze cowbird, like that Misenella starling that you just saw there, you can sometimes tell how old it is by how big of a, it's not quite a hole, it's a different colored bone that you see through the head. And so, we all know that birds have hollow bones. In order to make that hollow bone, they start off with one layer and then they grow a second layer over it. Well, for their skull, they don't do that until they're fully hatched, and then it takes a couple months afterwards. So that's what this image is showing on the right, how that the different plate of bones can grow in on their head. And then some species, you can see that, and by how big the difference is, you can tell, okay, this is a really young bird, this is an old bird. Things like woodpeckers, you can't skull. Okay. So that's it for the banding information, but let's talk about safety. As we've already mentioned, you do have to be really aware of how you're handling the bird, if it's safe. The North American Banding Council is very adamant about good handling techniques, but there are a lot of other concerns for keeping birds safe when you're banding. So wind. If a bird gets into a mist net, but it's really windy, they can bounce around. They can maybe smack into something, okay? This photo is kind of a ridiculous photo. It's a fish head. Fish are not in our nets. We're not going fishing with them. Something was eating the fish and dropped it into the net. And you can see how the net kind of got caught on the guts of it. So imagine if you're a bird and you're stuck next to something dirty in the net, maybe you can get hurt from that thing. You know, if there's thorns, if there's like this. Other things to be aware of is temperature. So usually if it's over 90 degrees, you're not supposed to be banding. And that will totally change again on the habitat that you're in. You can only band for a certain number of hours. You're not supposed to do it in the middle of the day when it might be stressful for the birds. You have to be aware of the habitat. So if you have stretched your net out in an open place where a lot of sunlight is going to get to it and a bird flies in there, you can potentially give that bird heat stress because it's getting all the sunlight. So in order to mitigate for that, depending on where your nets are, you have to do frequent net runs. You have to clear those nets, you know, at maximum every 30 minutes, but sometimes it's every 15 minutes. So it really depends on your study site. And then lastly, predators. If you're setting up bands and hawks are constantly eating the bird, sorry, if you're setting up nets and the hawks are constantly eating what's in your net, you are doing a disservice to that bird community. Same thing with deer. Deer will eat a bird out of the net. Chipmunks will kill a bird that's in a net. So you need to be aware of what kind of predators are around, if they have found your nets, and if they do, you need to just close out. That's what's recommended, getting those birds into safety and out of your nets. Always, always, always check out the Bird Bander's Guide from NABC. They have so much information. They're very adamant about bird safety. Again, here on the right-hand side, I'm getting a gray catbird out of a mist net, and you can see that its feet are secure. It can't flop around. It also already has a band on it. So this is a recapture bird. Great information can be learned when we recapture the bird. I have its bag with me. I'm ready to put it in as soon as I get that bag out of the net. So again, getting the birds out of the net, it's supposed to be a quick process. Sometimes they're very tangled and it's a slower, steady process. You're always keeping in mind the stress the birds might be under. And so you give them that quiet space of the net, of the bag, as soon as you get them out of the net. On the right-hand side, there's that beautiful bird with that really cool tail. It comes to some parts of Texas, it migrates through, but many of you may not see it very often. And this would be a brown creeper. This is a brown creeper in Rhode Island, and it's just chilling on my thumb because it's a little bit cold. So again, temperature can impact the birds if it's too hot or if it's too cold. Too cold is easier. You kind of let them warm up. They can warm up in your hand. They can warm up in a bag that's tucked into your jacket. Sometimes it just takes a moment of bouncing your hand and the bird flies off and it's fine. Your heat and your safety is another concern. So on the left here is banding in Saipan. You can tell it's very sweaty. On the right is banding in Santa Ana this last summer. It's very mosquito-y, especially after our big storms and hurricanes. So making sure that you are safe and hydrated and protected from mosquitoes is a good idea. And then lastly, birds bite and they scream. So here we have a cardinal grabbing a metal ruler, and it's probably trying to break that ruler. They bite really hard. So everybody kind of jokes about getting cardinals out of the net. You're really not a bander until you have a blood blister from a cardinal, or that you've lost, hearing from golden crown woodpeckers. They are golden fronted woodpeckers. They're so good at yelling. They're so loud in the hand. You just want to ban them as quick as possible and get rid of them. Okay, here's some other bird safety tips. So on the right, this is a kestrel that was banded from UNT, and they put these little covers on their head to keep them calm. Once the bird can't see, they go into kind of a stupor. They're not going to keep trying to bite you. They're not going to, be kicking with their feet or anything. So this is a safety for both you and the bird. And then on the right here, these are great horned owl feet. You really need to have good control over feet when you're handling raptors. Okay, we're at 45 minutes. Patsy, is it okay to keep going? Or would you like to stop for just questions and we'll finish it up?
I'm trying to unmute myself here. It depends on how much more do you have?
I have a couple of slides about Mike's research. Maybe it'll take another 7 minutes.
Oh, yeah, let's do that. And then we've got several comments and several questions that we want to get to.
Okay, great. I see a go, go, go. So thank you. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, I was living in the Valley for a while because Michael, my partner, he started research on greyhawks and he's working through UNT. So he was trying to understand, you know, what is our resident population doing? And then what do the babies from those residents do? So I have a couple of short videos. Check out this hawk trap. So it's a grainy photo, grainy video. I did the faux pas and I filmed in a vertical way instead of horizontal. So you'll have to forgive me, but you can see the 2 mist nets that we have set up in a V, and we put down this little bait bird. So this is a stuffed great horned owl from UTRGV. And Michael played calls to see where the adults were and to get them kind of stirred up. And again, he was permitted to do that. He cleared it all with the banding lab. So here is the video. We're going to watch the hawk come in. It's a very short video and it ends abruptly because as soon as we saw the hawk was caught, we dropped everything and ran out to catch it, to get it out of the net. So, okay, here we go. If I can find the start button, you can watch it. Here we go. Boom. So go, go, go. Okay, that was happening in Santa Ana, but Michael was catching greyhawks all over Harlingen, Brownsville, just everywhere. So in this right-hand photo, he has an adult greyhawk that was caught in Harlingen, and he's attaching a transmitter backpack to it. You always need 2 people when you're doing this work. He doesn't have those same fancy hoods that the UNT people did. So he's just using, I think it's a Crown Royal bag, and it's just covering the bird. The bird is more relaxed this way. Here he is releasing that same hawk. So when you've caught hawks for research purposes, it is best to kind of gently toss them back into the air because it's energetically very expensive for the bird to try and create lift and take flight. So here's a slow-mo release. Hawk is like, what's happening? I see you, human. Oh, I get to go? Okay. And he flies away. She flies away. This is a female. And they were breeding in this person's backyard. This person gave Michael permission to trap on her front lawn. So this is what the backpack looks like. These are both adult greyhawks. On the left side of the screen, it's the first one that Michael ever put. And you see that gray transmitter. It's solar powered. And what he learned after getting about 10 of these out, they were just constantly dying or getting to the point where they only had like 5% energy left, because the greyhawks would preen it under their feathers and it couldn't get any sunlight. So on the right side of the screen, you see how the transmitter is now brown? That's an elevated solar panel. And these are what's called GSM transmitters. So they work off the cell network and they send location information from these adult hawks. So where are they staying? Where are they feeding, et cetera. But Michael was also interested in pair bonding. So here is another female. Look at her feet. You see the aluminum lock-on band, but then behind it, you can see an orange band. So all of his females had orange bands. All of the males had black bands. They all have alphanumeric codes on them. So that helps, again, with the resighting. If you go to the valley and you see a bird, if you can read the colored band and report it back, you're sharing information. It's really valuable. But not everybody got that GSM. The other type of transmitter he used was a VHF backpack. So here's an antenna, and this is working off of radio transmission. So Michael goes into the habitats, which you see on the right-hand side, and he uses an omnidirectional radar antenna and tries to find where the hawk is. Ideally, he gave a male or a female a VHF, and then the other one, the GSM transmitter. So he was trying to see, are the pairs staying together? Are they relatively close to each other? Are they using the same territory when they're not in breeding season? In addition to looking at the adults, he looked for the babies. So this is an example of what it takes to get into the nest and band the baby. So he's gonna send up a line and he's trying to get it close to the nest, but not so close that it would disturb the birds. So depending on the type of tree the nest is in, he either aims a little bit lower or maybe a lot above it, and then he's gonna climb up there and get the babies out. So here's a short video. Now, if you had your sound turned up entirely, you may have heard the adult kind of scream as soon as that gets over the tree, because it doesn't like that we're going by its baby. But Michael climbs up and he gets the babes out. And so on the right side of the screen here, you can see 3 beautiful juvenile, actually they're nestlings, they're not even juvenile. And if you look really close at the feathers there, especially on the bird that's sitting up in the back, all the feathers are still in pin. So they're still growing out, but their legs are adult size. Their leg size is not going to change from this moment on. So by putting the bands on the baby at this stage, we know exactly what nest they came out of, and hopefully what their parents are too, who their parents are too. But after the babies fully fledge and get out of the nest, he tries to recapture them so he can understand with a new transmitter, where's that bird going? And so on the left side of the screen, you see a juvenile bird has started to molt in some of that adult plumage, and it has the GSM transmitter on it. So we can tell where it's going to go. And here are 2 really cool studies maps from his study. So on the left side of the screen, those different shapes represent different percentages of how the bird spends its time. So it's like 50, 90, and 95%. So if you're in that orange area, you have a 50% chance of seeing the bird. If you go to the next smaller size, 90% of the time is spent in those 2 areas. And then that green coffin shape almost in the middle is where 95% of the time the bird is. On the right side of the screen, you can see where the birds have migrated to. And so these were a couple of juveniles that took off and they went way down to Honduras. So lightning round, why keep banding? The more you do it, the more you see, the more cool birds you can understand. So in this particular case, we got a bunch of chestnut-sided warblers together, gives you a great comparison point to really look at those different feather types. You can see banding information. So these are just some of the banding information that's on the BBL longevity records. 11 years for an ovenbird, that's crazy long. 7 years for a thrush, a water thrush, just amazing data can be gathered slowly but surely through banding. You get to see awesome plumage variations like this red tail. So this would be leucistic, not albino, right? There's other colors still there, but we don't know why. It only grew in some colored feathers and not all of them. This is a white-tailed kite, a juvenile that was caught and banded in January. It shouldn't be in this plumage at that time of the year. This was a novel understanding or new information that was gathered. Michael caught like 7 juveniles that were all like just hatched plumage. So really interesting that they were breeding. It's such a weird time of year, right? Between December and February, they were breeding. This is a Harris hawk. Look at that lower leg. It had broken its leg at some point and healed. So it's an anomaly. It's not something you see very often, but this bird is resilient. And now we can say how old it is. And if we catch it again, we can understand like how long did it live with this, disability, really, a broken leg. We don't know if it can fully use that leg. There's no way to tell, but it's healthy. It was a good weight. And then you never know what's going to show up in your net. These were both taken when banding with Mark Conway in the valley. If you know the bird on the right, great. Herons are awesome. That's a juvenile bird. You can see the edging on the feathers. But the bird on the left blew everyone's mind, and I didn't know what it was. I took it out of the net. I brought it back. I didn't know what it was. I didn't look at it that much when I took it out of the net. It's a golden crowned warbler. It's a Central South American bird that we don't see very often. And once you start banding, man, you just can't stop. You are going to be obsessing about molts. If you look at this picture of the crimson colored grosbeak, you can see that one black feather. And I just had to know, like, how old was this bird? I actually talked to another bander with this photo and tried to figure out how old it was. And so you'll just constantly want to know, what age is it? You'll want to do it all the time. And we'll stop there. I did have some quiz. If anybody wants to hang around and talk, I'd be happy to do that. A couple of tempting photos for you to try and figure out.
Well, we've got some questions, and nice tattoo was one of the, when you had your arm up there, beautiful tattoo, actually. Okay, here's a question. Can anyone buy a banding net?
Yes and no. So we have seen things on Amazon that talk about keeping birds out of your garden, and it's basically a mist net of really poor quality, you shouldn't do that. You should not buy a banding net. There's no reason to buy it unless you have reasons to be studying and grabbing the birds. It would be unethical to have a random bird net, but you can buy them from other like reputable banding resources. Again, why would you want to? Is it ethical, etc.? If you want to give it to somebody, if you want to support somebody and buy some extra resources for them, then by all means you can do that. But you want to be really upfront and careful about why you're trying to get that.
Well, in some parts of the world, poachers are a big problem, and they, of course, want to limit that. The trap that you use with the little loops to capture the talons of the hawks, would you spell that? What kind, or just say it slowly?
Wait. Yeah, ball, BAL, and then space, and it's chatry, CAR. Yeah, chatry. Put it in there. I think that's how you spell it. I just put it into the chat.
Okay, and I just want to mention that any links or whatever, and you sent me 2 links that you wanted me to put in afterwards. We are going to post this video on our Vimeo channel, and we'll put it in the description of some of those links so that everybody can see them afterwards if they like to do that. This was so interesting. I'm just, okay. Does it matter which leg you put the band on?
No, it doesn't. When I was in Saipan, the woman that I was banding with, she was left-handed. So she always used, she held the bird in her right hand and banded onto the left foot. Because I am right-handed, I hold the bird in my left and put the band on the right foot. I've seen, so with Michael's study, right, he always puts the colored band on a specific leg with the same sex. And if I try and say it, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's something like, black band on the right for males and colored or orange band on the right for females. It
kind of depends on the objective and what you're doing. There's no set rule on it then.
Correct.
Okay. And here's a question and I think you covered it a little bit. It says, is there no danger for the person or the bird using ungloved hands to do banding work?
Yeah. So like zoonotic diseases, almost nothing. I mean, it's very rare. You can tell if a bird is sick, right? If you are in contact with like, oh my gosh, what's the avian pox? That's what I was trying to think of, right? So maybe if you see something like that, if you get a bird out of the net, then you're going to wash your hands as soon as you're done handling it or use hand sanitizer. So in terms of zoonotic, not really. Yes, in terms of, if those hawks get you, that's not cool. You're not going to enjoy that. In my non-banding days, before I moved to Texas, I did AmeriCorps, and in AmeriCorps, I handled raptors for the education group I was with. And I got like one time a foot from a raptor, like scraped my arm. It's really uncomfortable. Both Michael and the person who trained him, Bill Clark, have been footed a couple of times. That means for the hawk to grab you with their talons, and they do release, and it's quite uncomfortable. You really have to take care of a wound like that. In terms of like hurting the bird or transmitting anything to the bird, there's really nothing that you're going to do that would hurt the bird that way. Trying to think of any other concerns about handling the birds. I don't know if the person who asked that question had anything else that they wanted to clarify in terms of, is it okay with the birds? I'd be happy to give more information there, but zoonotic is the biggest concern, and it's not really a concern. And then occasionally you can get footed by the raptors.
Thank you. And then the little baby birds that were at the end, the little raptors, the gray hawks, I guess, that showed, some people think birds don't have a tongue, and they really were showing their tongue really well. They really had tongue. Now the last question is, how is the transmitter attached to the bird's back, the ones that you were showing that Michael was putting on?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for asking that. And he actually, again, learning curve. If I go back and were to show like that first hawk that he ever caught that had the gray transmitter on it, he had, I just want to make sure I describe this well. On the transmitter, before it goes on the bird, there are 2 holes at the top and a hole at the bottom, and you can put what's called a backpack on there. So there's a little bit of padding that's glued to the bottom of the transmitter. And then there are 2 straps that are fed up through the top holes, and then 2 straps that are fed through the one bottom hole. And once you capture the bird, would it be helpful if I showed the picture where they're putting the backpack on?
Yeah, sure.
Let me just pull that back up. Hold on one moment. Almost there, I promise. You really can't see it in any of these earlier photos. So right here. What Michael's doing in this particular photo where they're sitting in the car, he is getting those straps over the wing of the bird because the bird is going to wear it like a backpack. It's going to be firmly affixed and tied in the front and glued together. No, sorry, it's not tied in the front. It goes over the front and back up through the hole at the bottom of the transmitter, and then it gets glued and tied on the back of the bird. The birds have chewed through the first material, which is like a woven Teflon. And I forget the name of the second material that he learned to use, but basically the bird stopped chewing through it. And when you look at it, one was a black strap and one was a white strap. So the white straps were harder for the birds to chew through. Not only did they chew through it, they may have also been able to like peck at the glue and rip off the transmitter that way, right? They can reach their whole back, they preen. Again, like when he lost his first transmitters or they couldn't charge, it was because the bird had preened the feathers over it. So it's not that the GSM is inaccessible. And so they would chew at the glue and just kind of bite it off. And once they got the secured spot, they could pull off the harness. And we actually recovered, I think, 2 harnesses that you could tell it had been chewed off. And so that second material, after he straps it on, not only does he glue it in place, he also sews through it with dental floss to make sure it stays on the bird. So it goes over the wings, over the belly, and to the back. It gets glued and sewn in place. You cut off the extra strap so the bird can't chew on it. It's firm against their body, but it's not so tight that they can't breathe. It's not so tight that they can't stuff their gorge and like have food in their crop. Really, there's almost no impact on how the bird can fly. Any kind of transmitter has to be less than 3% of the weight of the bird. I do not know how much greyhawks weigh. I probably should know that information, but these transmitters with all that backpack material I was talking about, maybe they weigh 20 grams or something like that, like that they're really light. And so they're not affecting the flight. They're not constraining the bird. They don't stop the bird's wings from being able to move. So hopefully that answered the question.
Thank you. One a related question: how long do they wear the transmitter? Forever, or until it quits working, or what?
Yeah, pretty much forever. We're really hoping that it's a long-term data study for especially any of the younger birds that got the GSM transmitters. With the VHF, the radio ones, those only have a battery life of 3 years. And so they will still be on the bird for the bird's life. We're finding out that greyhawks don't live that long. Like some of the adults are, we had an adult get hit by a truck like 6 months after we banded it. We've had them get eaten by great horned owls. We think it was a great horned owl that got it. We've found different bones that maybe a coyote got to it. We're not sure. So unfortunately, they don't live a very long time, but it will be on the bird for the rest of its life.
Tom just looked it up. They weigh about 540 grams, 1.2 pounds. Just for anybody's information that was interested.
According to Mr. Sibley.
According to Mr. Sibley.
Thank you, Tom.
And the other question was, with hawks, you don't have to worry about them biting with their beak.
No, they're really calm, like surprisingly calm. They kind of look at you like, what are you doing? They don't really like being handled. A lot of times they just have their mouth open, like it's a hawk face apparently. But yeah,
they don't use their beaks to attack anything. They just use it to eat. So
100%, Tom. Yep. Michael has been bit by kestrels more. Kestrels are more likely to bite than anything else.
Use their beak.
They bite their prey.
They have a notch for their beak and they bite the prey, but that's interesting. Well, gosh, everything, I mean, I'm sure you could just tell us much more, but that was so well put together, and the videos and the pictures were amazing because it showed enough of, to get us hooked and wanting to come out and observe. And putting your hands on the birds the first time is a very special privilege to touch a wild bird. And I will say that helping Craig, a lot of times we had children who were watching, and we would let them release the bird, gently hold them in their hand. and the look on their face when the bird, yeah, oh, we have a hooked one already here in this chat here. Yep, hooked. But and we give them a certificate, what kind of bird it was, and that kind of thing. And some people, mothers have told us that those kids still have that in their room for years afterwards. It's a very special thing to have happen. So
100%. This is the gateway drug for birds for a lot of people, is getting to hold one, getting to see one up close. They are feisty. Like, even I love kinglets. They're some of my favorite birds because for their size, they are just so powerful and so feisty. And you really notice that when you're trying to band it and it's pecking at you. Going back to that biting question, the other thing I want to say is shrikes. We have permission to ban loggerhead shrikes, and that's part of a study that Craig is also working on. And those guys will shred your hand.
Yeah.
We really need to practice the bandage grip when you have them and angle the head back so that they cannot keep biting you.
they have an evil little hook on the end. Well, thank you so much. And we're going to have the video with the chat, with the questions and so forth. It'll be a day or so before we get that up. We have a new message here. Let's see.
Thank you,
Oh,
Becca.
wonderful informative presentation. Thank you so much for sharing with us. And thank you for the work that you and Michael are doing with the birds. It's important work, and we look forward to hearing more about the results that you're finding. And you'll come back and speak to us again another time.
Yeah, love to.
We'd love to have you. Does anybody have anybody want to unmute and reveal your face or say anything else? If not, I know that several people were wanting to know what some of the birds were.
Oh yeah.
Would you like to just kind of go through real quick? There was a quiz at the end. Is it something about the birds?
Yeah, it's a couple of different, we said that this special line across the tail means what? So just kind of throwing it back, seeing what you remember. But as far as the bird quiz, the first baby little raptors that we saw, those were great horned owls. And then it's followed by a red-eyed vireo on the second slide. We had an orange crown with the color bands on its leg, where you cannot see the crown whatsoever. And then followed by a sharp-shin hawk, snail kite, and sora. White-tailed kite adults were in here. White-tailed kite juveniles were in there. Yellow rump warblers, Harris hawks. No, not Baltimore.
A couple from Saipan.
Yep. Lincoln sparrows, Cooper's hawk, logger shrikes, Rufus hummingbirds. That's what Tony Heenahan was banding at our house. Olive sparrows more. I'm just kind of going through, making sure I know what I posted in here. We had Carolina wrens, we had bronze cowbirds, bird wings from Saipan. That's what the wingware was. We had the golden white-eye from Saipan, Micronesian starling from Saipan, brown creeper, gray catbird, northern cardinal, golden fronted woodpecker, kestrel, owl claws, that picture with owl feet, and then lots of greyhawks.
Wonderful. Well, I will say those people who say they can't tell the sparrows apart, if you go banding and you get them in your hand and you can see all those little head markings and other markings.
They're a lot easier than Pittonex flycatchers. A
lot easier than Pittonex flycatchers. And then once you see them up close, you can see them at a distance because you're trained your eye to look for what you're doing. So I would, if Craig's still looking for volunteers, you might want to check that out. And it's a good way to learn your sparrows and other prairie birds. There was another, hang on. I think there's one more thing in the chat here. It says, I would love a picture of the leucistic red-tailed hawk if possible.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that.
All right, would you like to post the email you would share with people in the chat, and I'll put that in with the video.
Yeah, so it's in there. Feel free to email me with follow-up questions if you want to see any more bird pictures. I could do it all day long.
Very, very, very good. Well, we thank you again, and we hope you have a great time at the Rio Grande Valley Bird Festival. You're going to be involved in that, and let us know. Keep in touch. We miss you in San Antonio. When you come up here, if you don't come see us, we are going to be very upset.
I'll let you know next time I'm up there.
Okay, and all the best of luck. Bye-bye.
Have a great night. Bye now.
Thanks. Thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you in November. Thank you.